We now have a public hearing in regard to ordinance 1207.
LaShawn Foster, 2527 Southside Drive, Cambridge, Maryland. In regard to the proposed curfew, I would ask the council to rethink trying to impose a curfew on our youth at this time for many reasons. We're working with no offense, inadequately staffed police department, inadequately paid police department, a city that has very little for youth to do, inadequately staffed and paid.
The Monday, October 9th.
And July of 2020.
Any opposed?
Department of more than 44. LaShawn Foster, 2527 Southside Drive, Cambridge, Maryland. In regard to the proposed curfew, I would ask the council to rethink trying to impose a curfew on our youth at this time for many reasons. We're working with no offense, inadequate police department, inadequately paid police department, a city that has very little for youth to do, inadequately staffed and paid youth programs for our children here. There are many things that we need to put into place before we consider a curfew. One would be giving us a police department of more than 44 police officers. 44 would suffice in 2010, not in 2022, when our city has only increased in population. Putting children on lockdown after being on lockdown from COVID for such a long time is not the answer. It's only going to make things worse. With the recent murders this weekend, if our police department had a curfew and they were chasing children instead of chasing the person who actually committed the crime, it may not have gotten solved. We need more mental health programs. We have a lot of mental health. That is the reason for a lot of these programs. We need gang intervention programs here to stop luring our children from the school books and playing like normal when we were little, 9, 10, 11, and 18-year-olds did. But give them something to do. Give them something to be proud of themselves. Just don't say we're going to lock you in the house after being in school all day long. Give them something to do to tire them out. So by the time 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock get here or 10 o'clock, they're ready to go home and go to bed, like children should at that particular age. Thank you.
Sergio Espani. I'm coming from across the bridge in Baltimore. I'm Director of Engagement and Mobilization for the ACLU of Maryland. I particularly want to point out that I'm coming from across the bridge and from Baltimore because it seems like that's what we're trying to transfer over here. Baltimore has tried youth curfews in the past unsuccessfully, as I brought up a few weeks ago in the same chamber. It's important to point out that the differences here between your city and Baltimore City, the scale is massively different, to say the least. A couple of weeks ago, the mayor's office and police department shared some details on just how many children would be impacted by this and how many children need interventions in Cambridge. The numbers that were given were about 2,575 children are aged between 11 and 17 years old. There were around 200 complaints, half of which were dismissed, meaning that over 2,500 children would be impacted by a youth curfew based on the actions of less than 3% of them, where we're talking about a small enough figure that with the right interventions and the right level of community work can be approached effectively without needing such a broad approach as a curfew. Again, we're not denying the need to address public safety by a long shot. This is actually very much tied into like how do we target effective approaches and effective policing to get us to improve public safety rather than just throwing it all out there in a way that we know is not going to go to all 2,500 kids. It's going to be fairly focused on specific kids. Every time that there's been a youth curfew enacted, what ends up happening is we see that there's racially disproportionate in terms of who is being impacted by this, along with kids that are also just tend to be poor. So with all that said, again, I just don't want to make light of what's been shared earlier. I appreciated the moment of silence. This is very real. And in the tragedy that happened over the last week, it just needs to be said out loud. Like, these were individuals ranging in age from mid-20s to late 60s. No one was between 11 or 17 years of age. And as was mentioned earlier, considering the understaffing, it seems like that wouldn't be the approach to go. With that said, like, it needs to be also very clear. I want to be clear. The city commissioners, the president, mayor, several nonprofit leaders, and others here have been spending months and months trying to talk through what are ways to go about this if it's not a curfew. Several of those examples have been discussed. I know this ranges from targeted approaches, including additional youth programming, direct outreach in areas that have experienced vandalism, targeted community policing. Local leaders have also talked about the potential about tapping into about $750,000, with the concern that it seems to be limited to about 2024. A few weeks ago, when I mentioned that, what was brought up was, if that's the case, we're not going to have any additional funding, and that we should be actively thinking about how we're increasing funding to education, at a local department level, and really that without actually strengthening funds for local education, it doesn't matter what you say, this quick fix isn't going to do it. On that note, the ACLU of Maryland has worked with advocates in the Eastern Shore and across the state for years to increase funding for at-risk youth across Maryland, but with an explicit focus on communities where there's been direct, very intentional disinvestment when compared to some of the wealthier counties. Dorchester is one of those counties. Nearly $3.8 billion are being funded now for the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. It's already begun to ramp up funding for after-school programming, mental health resources, and wraparound services to children and families with low income throughout Maryland. Dorchester County officials, Cambridge officials can be working closely with the school system, as this money is just starting to be implemented, in developing programs and coordinating resources that led by folks from the community to strategically and comprehensively address the needs of young people with these dedicated funds. Finally, residents need to be alerted, as was shared before, that very likely this curfew, as currently drafted, raises serious concerns about its constitutionality. When this has gone to court several other times, what's ended up happening is the courts have asked local jurisdictions to justify the need for a curfew before they can move forward. And there's explicit law in Maryland state law that targets the Eastern Shore. To that end, when local municipalities have tried to introduce a curfew in years past, this includes Federalsburg, Princess Anne, Hurlock, Easton, and Salisbury, when presented with this, they realized that there are simply more effective approaches to public safety and of community resources. Again, not denying the need to address public safety and to keep Cambridge children safe, but a program that would punish all children for the behaviors of a few, financially burdened families that are already living on the edge rather than helping them achieve financial stability, divert limited policing resources, and potentially open the city to court challenges simply is not the way to go. Thank you.
Good evening. Dr. Teresa Stafford, 2429 Rock Drive. First of all, Mayor Rod, I want to thank you for setting some parameters and for this particular event, identifying the rules of engagement. I want to preface what I'm going to say by we have community engagement forums so that we can hear from the individuals that are most impacted, which is certain segments of this community. So when we go out into our communities and we ask people to share their ideas and to give their input so that the 5 councilmen can make a decision, I appreciate the fact that we give those people that opportunity. I can remember in your first forum, you asked a question that had something to do with African Americans. And you stated, I'm not African American, I should not be making decisions for African Americans. So what I'm asking you is that should this not get passed tonight and you have another community forum, that you listen to the African Americans that you've invited to the table to give their opinion. With that being said, I am here again tonight saying that it is important that we not scrap this ordinance because it doesn't solve all the issues that we would be facing. I think that our city manager said it best in his closing statements the other night. And more importantly, I think Shay's son said it even better. When he was asked, what do you think about this issue, he said, paraphrasing, I don't have anything to say because I'm going to be in my house. So when we talk about 2,500 kids, we're not talking about 2,500 kids being locked in their homes, because many of these kids are going to be home anyway. When we talk about this curfew, from where I see it, is that we open the door and we give our police department the opportunity to interact with children who are on the streets between the hours of 10 and 5 that are not creating or doing criminal activity, but they're on the street. They're 12, they're 13 years old, and they're on the street at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. It provides our police department the opportunity to stop a child that's not creating a criminal activity at that point and asking them, why are you on the street at 3 o'clock in the morning? I see that it serves a couple points, and I've said it before. It gives the police an opportunity to find out why the kid's not on the street. It gives us, as the community, an opportunity to engage in those kids that are on the street at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning at 12 years old, to figure out what is it that you want to be doing other than being on the street. I'm asking this council to please do something. And no, the people that were killed the other night were not teenagers. But what would have happened if this had been 10 o'clock at night and that 20 or 25 kids that we see sometime riding through our streets, that person, instead of killing those 2 individuals that were killed, decided, I'm going to take a couple pop shots at these kids that are riding through the streets. It's not about criminalizing our kids. It's not about taking away parental rights. It's about, at this point, providing some safety for the entire community. Those kids like Shay's kid who says, I'm in my house anyway, I don't have anything to say because I'm going to be home anyway. And it's about providing safety for the adults that are in our community. They're afraid to come out of their houses. So I'm just asking, please don't scrap this. If you have to go back and revise it and put some things in, because I know a lot of people are concerned about the economic impact, if there's something that needs to be flushed out more about that, then let's do that. But let's not say that we're not going to move forward because of a threat of a possible going to court or something. People have gone to court and they fared well because they have put in curfews. So I'm just asking you, look at the whole picture, listen to the community, not what they say here, but after a killing, listen to what they're saying after somebody is killed on the streets. And yes, it's going to be in specific communities. And I hate to say it, I don't know any white kids that have been killed. I don't know any white kids that have been reported being on the streets from 10 to 5 a.m. in the morning. It's a community, and it's going to be heavily policed in the black area because that's where the criminal activity is happening. That's where the killings are happening. So just please have an open mind and do something for our community. Thank you.
Greg Meekins, 1344 Cambridge Beltway. I wasn't going to say anything, and let me first thank the council for starting the process, because we all feel and know something needs to be done. However, I would ask that you defer implementing this pilot program. One being, I think the first reading I had shared the issue about programs and services. Linked with that, when we talked about, there was a lot of discussion about the sanctions on parents. I want to give you a quick example of what can be done. I attended a meeting at the Intergenerational Center, and I may have the name wrong. It's called the PEP program, Parents Educating Parents. That's an opportunity what I consider a real opportunity to sanction parents in a positive way, because we have a number of parents, I believe, who need help from other parents who have gone through similar kinds of experiences to learn parenting skills and help their kids to understand what they as parents saying you will do. You will be in this house at a certain hour. Given that, I think it behooves all of us to begin to look at a number of programs. I had shared with the mayor, there's so many programs out here. I feel inundated. But we do know every program is not going to work. We have to make sure they're research-based, and there's an opportunity that we can get the capacity to do that. I think everybody in the city of Cambridge does want to see something positive happen. But I think, especially given the situation of the concerns about sanctions, let's put it on hold, explore those possibilities, see if that, might be one of the better approaches to take to help parents grow and be parents and do what they need to do for their kids. Thank you.
Shay Lewis Cisco, 108 Wood Duck Drive, Cambridge, Maryland. So it's been an interesting journey. And so for me, what I want to say is that I've heard the commissioner say, we need to do something. And I've attended several community meetings, mayor forums that Mayor Steve has had, and just listening to feedback from the community and also sharing in those conversations. I agree that something does need to be done. As I stated at the last mayor forum, when Chief Todd shared his data from July 15th, 2021 up until present, he spoke about the number of total arrests from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. being 70 arrests, and then he gave the data from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. with the total arrests of the targeted population of juveniles that we're referring to of 140 total arrests. And so, as I stated at that forum, while I do believe that we need to look at not just one time of the day, but there's a great concern for me when we talk about 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., the 140 arrests that he had included in the data, and how many of those arrests were duplicates from the 10 p.m. to the 7 a.m. hour. And so I'm like Mr. Meekins, I'm saying that if council can postpone the action of this ordinance and look at the way that it's written and really look at collaborative efforts. I know we talk about programs, we talk about services. There's no program, as Commissioner Cephas Spidey said in another meeting, there's not going to be one program that we can come up with that's going to run 24 hours a day. However, what I am asking is that the council takes into consideration a thorough process that when the police department engages the youth, what happens after that engagement. Not only will they be given the ability to, find out where this youth is from, who their family is, but really in the ordinance have a policy and a dual process that is done where the community has full transparency that this is what's going to happen. I remember Commissioner LeJan sharing at one of the forums where she was riding after 10 and she engaged a young person, and the young person, she asked that young person's name. The young person kind of said, oh, my name is this, and she gave reference to, it could be 2,000 Johns, right? And I'm not sure that's the name that she gave, but I bring that up to say that what's going to be the difference in the police interaction with that youth and Commissioner LeJan's interaction with that youth who didn't give her their name, or that individual, that young person saying to the police department, the police officer, don't worry about what my name is. So I'm just asking that the council consider the way that this ordinance is written and provide a process by which what will happen when they engage those youth. Last in my comments, I want to just read the scripture, Ephesians 4:2-3. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient. Bear with one another in love. Make every effort to keep unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. So we all want to see peace in our community, but we have to make sure that as we approach whatever solution, and I'll be honest, I don't think that there is a solution. I think that there's something that the commissioners and the city can come together collectively with organizations in the community to remedy this, but it's not going to be a solution to end it all. So that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
My name is Nancy Shockley, 4846 Laurie Lane, Wolford, Maryland. I am the director of the Community Partnership for Children and Families, the local management board under Moving Dorchester Forward. I had no intentions of speaking tonight when I came here. I came for the purpose of just gathering more information. I had the opportunity to participate the last session on and listen to and on the forum. And in response to that, myself, along with Chris Weedleton, the executive director of Moving Dorchester Forward, had the opportunity to meet with Chief Todd and his staff to talk about how we could support their efforts. We all recognize in this room that something needs to happen. And there's a lot of things going on in our community. Our job as a local management board is to actually improve the service delivery system for children and families. Through our conversation with the chief and his staff last week, we've already begun to have some conversations with our agency partners. I'm here to ask that the council consider tabling your vote on the ordinance. Allow, as Shay indicated, just an opportunity for us to continue to work with the chief, to work with our agency partners through juvenile services and the Department of Social Services to actually improve some systems we already have in place and how we can streamline them and better meet the needs of those individuals that law enforcement may come in contact with. I think we do have an opportunity. The time is now, but I don't think the ordinance is the right thing to do at this point. So thank you.
My name is Dave Thatcher. I live at 1007 Locust Street here in Cambridge. There's an old adage that if we don't learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And this gentleman from Baltimore, wherever he is, has already given you information that said youth curfews on the Eastern Shore have been tried and have failed. In my recollection, the only time that curfews have really been necessary in our country is when we've had natural disasters that have devastated areas and looting becomes rampant and martial law is declared. And to help that martial law become effective, they put a curfew on the whole city, not just a youth group. Anyway, I don't think the curfew is a good idea, and it ought to be scrapped.